When we speak about the concept of detachment in relationships, people often misinterpret it as emotional withdrawal, a kind of cold, calculated aloofness meant to manipulate the other person. But that's not what I'm talking about at all. True detachment is not about shutting down your feelings. It's about creating enough space between you and the other person so that your individuality can breathe. It's about understanding that desire and respect require a certain tension, a dynamic where the other person can still discover you, rather than feel they have already consumed every part of who you are. Think of the early stages of attraction. There is curiosity. There is an element of mystery. You are still getting to know one another, and that unknown creates energy. Esther Perel often talks about this as the interplay between love and desire. Love seeks closeness, desire thrives in distance. The problem is that in long-term relationships, people confuse intimacy with merging entirely. They think that the more enmeshed they are, the stronger their bond will be. But complete merging actually erases the very contrast that fuels respect and attraction. When you become too available, too accessible at all times, you remove the friction that makes another person value your presence. It's not about scarcity for its own sake. It's about maintaining a life, an identity, and a rhythm that doesn't revolve entirely around the relationship. If you have no boundaries, if you have nothing outside of the relationship that defines you, you stop being a person in her eyes. You become a constant, an appliance, something that is simply there, and no one respects what they assume will always be there. We respect what we could lose. We respect what has the autonomy to walk away. We respect what does not need us for its survival. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally unavailable or playing games to keep her guessing. That kind of manipulation is shallow and, over time, transparent. Instead, it's about cultivating a deep inner life that remains intact whether she's in it or not. That life might include your work, your passions, your friendships, your sense of mission. Anything that affirms you are not dependent on her for your sense of worth. People often underestimate how much respect is tied to perception. When you are overly eager to please, when you put yourself second in every interaction, you might think you are showing love. In reality, you are subtly communicating that you have no boundaries, that her approval matters more than your own principles. And once someone senses that you will compromise your self-respect to keep them, their respect for you naturally declines. Detachment, then, is a psychological signal. It says, I am here because I choose to be, not because I need to be. It says, my happiness does not hinge entirely on you, and my identity exists beyond this relationship. This creates a balance where love can breathe, because the relationship is no longer suffocating under the weight of dependency. When a man maintains his sense of self, he becomes harder to control, because he cannot be swayed by emotional threats, silent treatments, or the fear of loss. Ironically, this often makes him more attractive. Why? Because in the human psyche, value is often tied to rarity and sovereignty. The moment you seem fully owned by someone else, the tension breaks, and with it, much of the desire. I've seen it countless times. Men lose themselves in relationships, thinking their devotion will secure loyalty, only to watch the woman slowly pull away, and they don't understand why. They believe that giving more time, more attention, more reassurance will rekindle her respect. But what she is longing for, though she might not even articulate it, is the version of him that was whole, confident, and unshakable before he handed over all of his emotional power. To detach in the right way is to reintroduce that dynamic. It's to live with the understanding that you are not here to be absorbed into someone else's life. You are here to share your life with them. This subtle shift restores balance. It transforms you from being an ever-present figure to being a person whose presence is earned, cherished, and never taken for granted. You can think of it like a fire. If you smother it with too much wood all at once, you suffocate it. But if you feed it gradually, with space for air to flow, it burns brighter and longer. Detachment is the air, Without it, the flame of respect dies. With it, there is room for both connection and intrigue. Philosophically, this aligns with a deeper truth about human relationships. Freedom is more magnetic than control. When a woman senses you are with her out of free will, not compulsion, she respects the choice. She knows you could leave, but you stay. That's different from staying because you're too afraid to go. That's different from staying because your world would collapse without her, and she can feel that difference on a visceral level. So when you detach completely, not as a weapon, but as a natural extension of yourself, sufficiency, you invite her to relate to you from a place of mutual admiration, not dominance. She sees you not as an emotional crutch, but as an equal partner. And in that space, paradoxically, intimacy can deepen, because neither of you is afraid of losing yourselves in the process. In the end, detachment is not about making her chase you. It's about making sure you never lose the person she was drawn to in the first place. It's about standing firm in your identity so that her respect is built on who you are, not on how much you bend. And when she knows she can't possess you entirely, she will value the part of you she can never fully touch. Because the truth is, respect is born in the space where dependence ends and freedom begins. And if you can hold that space, you will never have to demand her respect. She will give it freely, because you've earned it by never surrendering yourself completely. Over-attachment is one of those traps that feels noble in the moment, but corrodes the very foundation of a relationship over time. At first, it might seem like devotion, answering every call immediately, dropping everything to be available, constantly checking in, rearranging your life so hers takes priority over everything else. You tell yourself this is love, that this is what commitment looks like. But slowly, without realizing it, you begin to teach her that your time, your attention, and your presence have no boundaries. And what has no boundaries is rarely valued. Humans are wired to notice scarcity. We naturally pay more attention to what is not always within reach. When you are too accessible, too predictable, too eager, you strip away that natural sense of value. She no longer has to earn your time or respect it. It's simply there, waiting, like the air in the room. And like air, it becomes invisible, assumed, and overlooked. This is where respect begins to erode. Over-attachment often comes from a place of fear. Fear of losing her, fear of conflict, fear of being alone. So you overcompensate. You give more, you compromise more, you stretch yourself thinner, thinking it will secure her love. But here's the paradox. The more you make her the center of your emotional universe, the more you communicate that you have no center of your own. And that kind of dependence doesn't inspire respect. It breeds contempt. Esther Perel has spoken about how desire is sustained not by constant closeness, but by a healthy degree of independence. When you make someone your entire source of identity, you create a dynamic that is unbalanced. Instead of standing as two whole individuals choosing to share their lives, you become an extension of her world, orbiting around her as the central sun. This doesn't make her feel cherished. It makes her feel burdened. It subtly shifts the energy from partnership to possession. And possession is dangerous because once a person feels they have complete ownership over you, emotionally, psychologically, they stop treating you as a choice. They start treating you as a given. Over time, they may even resent you for the same qualities they once found comforting, because constant availability robs them of the space needed to feel their own desire. I've seen men fall into this pattern without even noticing. They begin with confidence and independence, and the woman is drawn to that strength. But as the relationship deepens, they abandon the habits and interests that made them whole. They stop seeing friends, stop pursuing their own goals, and start making every decision with her preferences in mind. At first, she might enjoy the attention, but slowly the dynamic shifts. She sees that he will bend himself in any direction to keep her happy. She learns that he has no line he will not cross, no principle he will not compromise, if it means keeping her close. That's when respect begins to dissolve, not because she is cruel or ungrateful, but because the human mind simply does not admire what is fully dependent on it. Respect is reserved for those who have the strength to stand alone, the courage to say no, and the willingness to walk away if necessary. When you abandon those qualities, you abandon the very traits that made her see you as a man worth respecting. The truth is, over-attachment often feels like love to the one giving it, but it feels like pressure to the one receiving it. When you smother someone with constant presence, you remove their ability to miss you. Without absence, there is no longing. Without longing, there is no desire. Without desire, respect fades into complacency. This is why detachment isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your emotional balance. It's about understanding that a healthy relationship requires two people who can both stand on their own legs. That means you need to have a life that does not collapse without her. You need to be able to make decisions, hold opinions, and pursue ambitions that exist independently of her influence. When you stop over-attaching, something shifts. Your time becomes valuable again because it's not given away indiscriminately. Your attention becomes more impactful because it's not available at every moment. She begins to see you not as a constant background presence, but as a man whose life she gets to be a part of a life that would still be full and meaningful even if she wasn't there. And here's the beauty of it. When you're no longer clinging to her for validation, you interact from a place of choice rather than need. You stop filtering your words and actions through the question, will this make her happy? And start asking the deeper question, is this true to who I am? That authenticity, that willingness to risk disapproval for the sake of integrity, is what reignites respect. Over-attachment kills respect because it signals that you are more afraid of losing her than you are committed to being yourself. When you flip that, when you become more committed to being yourself than to clinging to her, you not only regain her respect, you regain your own. And once you have that, you're no longer negotiating from a place of fear, but from a place of strength. The irony is that when you are willing to lose her, you are far less likely to. That willingness communicates something primal. You are not hers because you have to be. You are hers because you choose to be. And choice is infinitely more attractive than obligation. So remember this. A woman will never truly respect the man who cannot stand without her. But she will always respect the man who stands tall beside her, knowing he can walk away and still remain whole. The strange paradox of relationships is that the less you need someone, the more freely you can love them. Detachment is often misunderstood as emotional distance, a way of keeping people at arm's length to avoid getting hurt. But in truth, the right kind of detachment is the gateway to deeper, more authentic connection. It's not about withholding affection, it's about releasing the fear of loss. Because when you are no longer afraid of losing someone, you stop relating to them from a place of anxiety, control, or manipulation. You start relating to them from a place of strength. Think about the energy of desperation. When you're desperate to hold on, every interaction is tinged with tension. You monitor their words, their expressions, their silences, looking for signs of reassurance. You overanalyze texts. You adjust your behavior to avoid conflict. You start bending yourself into the shape you think will keep them from leaving. But in doing that, you're no longer fully yourself. You're a performance. And performances might win temporary approval, but they never inspire lasting respect. Now compare that to the energy of someone who could walk away without their world collapsing. That person speaks honestly without worrying if their truth will scare the other away. They set boundaries without apology. They can be generous without keeping score because they are not giving to get. They're giving because they want to. Their love is not born from need, it's born from choice. And choice, as Esther Perel reminds us, is where real desire lives. Detachment creates emotional clarity. When you're not clinging to someone for your sense of self-worth, you can actually see them more clearly, not as an object you're trying to keep, but as a person you're choosing to know. You can appreciate their presence without trying to control it. This, ironically, often pulls them closer, because nothing is more magnetic than someone who is with you simply because they want to be, not because they fear being without you. A lot of people believe that love is about merging completely, But true intimacy is about standing side by side as two whole individuals. Detachment is the space that allows both people to remain whole. Without it, the relationship collapses into dependency, and dependency always comes with unspoken resentment. You resent the other person for the power they have over your happiness, and they resent you for needing them in order to be whole. When you master detachment, you take that weight off the relationship. You're no longer demanding that the other person carry your self-esteem. You're no longer handing them control over your emotional state. You're saying, I am complete and I invite you into my life, but my life will go on regardless. This doesn't diminish the depth of your love. It actually purifies it, because now every moment you spend together is a conscious choice, not an act of survival. One of the reasons detachment deepens respect is because it projects confidence, not arrogance, not indifference, confidence. You're confident enough to know that you can love someone without losing yourself. Confident enough to allow disagreements without fearing the end. Confident enough to give them the freedom to be who they are, without needing them to conform to your every expectation. That kind of freedom is rare, and people instinctively respect those who can give it. And make no mistake, detachment is not a lack of investment. You can be fully invested in someone and still be detached in the sense that you're not emotionally dependent on their behavior for your happiness. In fact, the most powerful connections are built on this paradox. You care deeply, but you're willing to let go if the connection no longer serves either of you. That willingness changes the tone of the entire relationship. It removes the underlying tension of I can't lose you, and replaces it with I choose you today, freely. When both people operate from that place, love becomes lighter. There's no emotional blackmail, no walking on eggshells, no subtle battles for control. Instead, there's mutual admiration. You each know the other is there by choice, not obligation. And that makes every moment more meaningful, because you're not together out of fear. You're together out of desire. The mistake many people make is believing that detachment is something you do to keep the other person in line. But it's not a strategy, it's a mindset. If you're pretending to be detached while secretly obsessed, it will show. True detachment comes from genuinely knowing that you are enough on your own. It comes from building a life so full that no relationship, no matter how beautiful, defines you completely. And here's the hidden beauty in all of this. When you can let go, you're actually more capable of holding on in a healthy way. You stop suffocating the connection. You give it air. You give it room to grow. You allow the other person to miss you, to appreciate you, to experience the contrast between your presence and your absence. And in that contrast, respect and desire are kept alive. The point is not to be cold or distant, but to be free. Free from the need to control, free from the fear of loss, free from the illusion that your value depends on someone else's choice to stay. In that freedom, you can love more deeply, because your love is no longer a bargain. It's a gift. So, if you truly want a woman's respect, learn to detach, not as a punishment, not as a manipulation, but as a natural expression of your wholeness. Let her feel that you're with her because you want to be, not because you have to be. Let her see that your love is strong enough to give her space, and your self-respect is strong enough to walk away if needed. It looks like in our earlier outline, we only defined 3 main key points for this speech, so there's no official key point 4 yet. If you'd like, I can create a 4th point that fits seamlessly with the first 3. Something that deepens the theme of detachment and respect while still staying in harmony with the tone and flow we've been building. For example, the 4th key point could be, your boundaries teach her how to treat you. The idea that a woman doesn't respect your words, she respects the standards you live by and enforce. Your detachment means nothing if you still tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional manipulation. Boundaries are not walls. They are the clear lines that signal you know your worth. Once we lock this in, I can immediately expand it into a 900-word segment that feels like a natural continuation of the speech, matching the intellectual and psychological depth of the other points. It seems we haven't yet defined a key point 5 in our current structure. So before I expand it into 900 word segment, we need to create one that naturally extends the philosophy of the first 3 points, and what could have been a fourth, while maintaining that psychological depth and the detached confidence framework we've been developing. A strong candidate for key point 5 could be: respect is earned in how you respond to disrespect. Detachment and independence mean little if you crumble the moment you are tested. At some point, a woman will push your boundaries, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, not because she's malicious, but because relationships test limits. Your reaction in those moments either solidifies her respect or erodes it. Responding with grounded calm, not anger or emotional pleading, shows strength. You don't threaten to leave. You simply will if respect is broken beyond repair. That quiet certainty is far more powerful than words. If you like, I can now expand this key point 5 into a full 900 word segment that feels like it belongs right after the other sections you've already had me write. It will read as part of the same speech, in the same authoritative yet conversational voice.